My name is Alara Vance. For the last few years, my world has been small, but not in a way that felt constricting. It has been a world measured in the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans, the weight of my son's head on my shoulder as we read stories, and the quiet satisfaction of a day's hard work. I live in a little craftsman bungalow in the Selwood neighborhood of Portland, a house with more character than structural integrity, where ivy creeps up the porch columns and the wooden floors whisper stories with every step. My son, Leo, who is 8, says the house sighs. I think he's right. Standing by my kitchen window this morning, watching the quintessential Portland drizzle paint silver streaks on the glass, I took a sip of my own coffee. The light was soft and gray, filtering through the dense leaves of the Douglas fir in our yard, casting our small kitchen in a gentle, contemplative glow. It's a light I've come to love, a light that encourages introspection. My reflection in the windowpane showed me a woman I was still getting to know, 34, with tired eyes that held onto a certain softness and a few stray silver threads in my dark hair that I'd earned, not inherited. I used to be an artist, a landscape painter who saw the world in gradients of light and shadow. Now, I see the world in the faces of the people I serve at the Gilded Sparrow, the cafe where I've worked for the past 3 years. Mom, the knot is doing the loopy thing again, Leo's voice, a sweet, clear note in the quiet house, called from the living room. A smile touched my lips, chasing away the pensive mood. I found him standing in the middle of our worn Persian rug, looking utterly defeated by the dark green tie-draped askew around the collar of his crisp white shirt. He looked so small and yet so serious in his little gray suit. Ah, the dreaded loopy thing, I said, kneeling before him. It's a very sneaky creature, but I know how to tame it. My fingers, nimble from years of holding paintbrushes and now from tying countless apron strings, made quick work of the silk. As I smoothed the knot, a familiar ache tightened in my chest. Today was the day. My former sister-in-law, Celeste, was getting married. It was a world away from our quiet life, a world I had no desire to re-enter. 3 years ago, my own world had crumbled, not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating finality. My husband, Julian, the man whose ambition I had once mistaken for passion, had decided I was no longer a suitable accessory for his life. He was a rising star in Portland's high-end real estate development scene, his name synonymous with sleek, glass-walled condos that reshaped the city's skyline. A wife who had traded her canvases for a barista's apron, who found more joy in a perfectly frothed latte than a glitzy charity gala, was an anchor on his ascent. I think it's time we went our separate ways, he had said, his voice as smooth and polished as the marble countertops in our former life. We've just grown into different people, Alara. I didn't cry, not then. I felt a strange, hollow calm. I nodded, signed the papers that dissolved a decade of my life, and moved with a 5-year-old Leo into this little rented house. It was an act of self-preservation, a quiet reclaiming of my own dignity. Leo, I said, looking into his serious, gray eyes so like his father's, but filled with a depth of empathy Julian could never comprehend. Today is Aunt Celeste's special day. We need to be on our best behavior and remember to be gracious, no matter what. He was a perceptive child. He had felt the chill from Julian's family long before he understood its source. His grandmother, Eleanor, and his aunt, Celeste, viewed me and, by extension, him, with a thinly veiled disdain. Grandma Eleanor and Aunt Celeste don't really like us, do they, Mom? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I sighed, wanting to be honest without being bitter. Sweetheart, their world is very different from ours. They measure things with a different ruler. But they are still your family, and that connection, however strained, is still there. Even as I spoke, I could hear Celeste's voice in my head, a sharp, cutting sound I'd overheard at a family dinner years ago. She's just dabbling at that little cafe, she'd said to a friend, her laugh like shattering glass. It's rather quaint, I suppose. Pity about her art career. Celeste, a successful art curator, had always seen my decision to pause my painting to raise Leo as a personal failure, a confirmation of her own superiority. Today, she was marrying Arthur, a literature professor, in a lavish ceremony at one of Portland's most exclusive venues. Eleanor, my former mother-in-law, was the architect of that disdain. Her belief in social strata was absolute, and she'd never forgiven Julian for marrying a dreamy artist with no pedigree. After the divorce, her contempt became overt. She treated Leo with a strange coolness, as if he were a living reminder of Julian's momentary lapse in judgment. The wedding invitation, a heavy cardstock square with embossed silver lettering, had felt like a summons, not a welcome. It was an obligation, a performance of family unity for the sake of appearances. My first instinct was to send my regrets, to shield myself and Leo from the inevitable slights. But then Leo had looked at me with those solemn eyes and said, "I'd like to see Dad." And so, for my son, I would go. I would be a ghost at the feast, a silent observer. I couldn't have known that this day would irrevocably alter the landscape of all our lives. "Okay, my handsome boy. We're ready." I took a deep breath, smoothing the skirt of my simple, deep teal dress. It was an unassuming choice, designed not to draw attention, but the rich color brought out the green in my eyes and flowed with an understated elegance. I placed my hands on Leo's small shoulders. "Remember what we always say? We are a team. No matter what happens, we have each other." Leo looked up, his small face set with a determination that mirrored my own. "A team," he affirmed, nodding. The Uber dropped us off at the entrance of the Vista House Ballroom, a grand historical building perched on a bluff with a sweeping view of the Willamette River and the city's skyline. As we climbed the wide stone steps, the opulence of the place felt like a physical pressure. Inside, massive floral arrangements perfumed the air, and a string quartet played softly in the grand foyer, where guests in designer clothes mingled, sipping champagne. I held Leo's hand a little tighter, a small anchor in a sea of wealth and privilege. At the reception table, a young woman with a clipboard smiled brightly. "Name, please." "Alara Vance," I said quietly. "And Leo Vance." Her smile faltered for a second. She scanned the list, her brow furrowing slightly. Her eyes darted from the list to our faces and back again. "One moment, please," she said, her professional veneer cracking just a little. She beckoned another staff member over, and they whispered together, casting discreet glances our way. A familiar heat began to creep up my neck. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on us, the simple woman in the teal dress and the small boy in his neat suit. We were an anomaly, a curiosity. "Right this way," the original attendant said, her smile now fixed and brittle. She led us into the main ballroom, a breathtaking space with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the dramatic view. As we followed her to a table near the back, tucked away behind a large pillar, Leo suddenly stopped. "Mom," he whispered, his voice tight. "What does that say?" I followed his gaze to the place cards on our table. While other tables were marked with elegant calligraphy, the Vance family, the Davenport family, our two place settings were starkly different. My card read, "Alara Vance, cafe staff." Leo simply said, "Her son." The blood rushed from my face. It was a calculated, petty cruelty, designed to put me in my place, to remind me and everyone else of my diminished status. My first impulse was to turn and walk away, to scoop up my son and flee from this place of exquisite, intentional humiliation. But then I saw Leo's face. He wasn't just hurt, he was confused, his brow furrowed with a dawning, righteous anger. For him, I would stay. "It's just a silly mistake, sweetheart," I murmured, my voice shaking slightly. With a steady hand I didn't know I possessed, I reached out, picked up both cards, and slipped them into my small clutch purse. "We know who we are." The ballroom filled, a symphony of muted laughter and expensive perfume. Then, Eleanor made her entrance, a regal figure in a gown of dove-gray silk, a cascade of heirloom diamonds at her throat. "Alara, you came," she said, her tone a perfect blend of surprise and mild disappointment. She glanced at Leo as if he were a piece of furniture before turning to embrace a wealthier-looking guest. The triumphant swell of an organ silenced the room. Everyone rose. At the end of the long white aisle, Arthur stood waiting, looking earnest and slightly nervous in his tuxedo. He was followed by Julian, who served as his best man. My breath caught. It was the first time I'd seen my ex-husband in over a year. He looked successful, confident, his suit tailored to perfection. He caught my eye for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression, before looking away. Then the music shifted and Celeste appeared at the entrance on her father's arm. She was a vision in a cloud of white lace and silk, her smile radiant, her happiness a tangible thing that filled the vast room. A collective sigh went through the crowd. The ceremony proceeded, a beautiful and solemn affair of vows and rings and a final, perfect kiss. They looked like a couple from a magazine, flawless and destined for a flawless life. Through it all, I kept a serene smile on my face for Leo, a mask of calm over the turbulent sea of my emotions. At the reception, waiters moved silently with trays of champagne and sparkling cider. Leo accepted a glass of cider, his eyes wide as he took in the spectacle. A lavish dinner was served, course after course of intricate, delicious food that I couldn't bring myself to taste. "Dad's looking over here," Leo whispered, nudging my arm. Julian was indeed glancing our way, his expression troubled, but he made no move to approach us. Just then, the clear chime of a glass being tapped for attention echoed through the ballroom. Eleanor stood at the head table, microphone in hand. "My dear friends, my cherished family," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you all for being here to witness the union of my beautiful daughter, Celeste, and her wonderful new husband, Arthur." She spoke of their bright future, of the joining of two great families. Then, her gaze, sharp and cold, landed on me. "We also have a rather unique guest with us today. My former daughter-in-law, Alara." A murmur went through the tables closest to her. As most of you know, Alara has found a new calling. She works at a local coffee shop. And it occurred to me, in the spirit of family, that she might want to feel a little more involved. Her smile was razor-thin. "In fact, I believe the catering staff is a little short-handed tonight. Alara, darling, you have so much experience. Perhaps you wouldn't mind helping clear a few plates." A stunned silence fell over the ballroom. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My face burned with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical blow. Anger, hot and fierce, surged through me, but I was paralyzed, pinned in my seat by the weight of their collective gaze. I could feel Leo vibrating with tension beside me. "Eleanor, that's hardly appropriate," someone at a nearby table murmured. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. She's a professional. It's what she does." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Better to be serving the meal than to be the leftover, wouldn't you say?" A ripple of cruel laughter started near the head table and spread. Celeste, my former sister-in-law, was smiling, a smug, triumphant look on her beautiful face. Even Julian, though he looked uncomfortable, managed a weak, placating smile. They were all in on it. This was the grand finale of my humiliation. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and shameful. My hands trembled in my lap. I wanted to shrink, to vanish. Just as I gathered the strength to stand and lead my son away from this toxic spectacle, I heard a small sound beside me, the quiet scrape of a chair on the polished floor. Leo had stood up. The laughter in the room sputtered out, replaced by a confused curiosity. In his small, perfectly fitted suit, Leo looked impossibly tiny, yet his posture was straight, his expression a mask of calm resolve that was far beyond his years. He began to walk, his steps measured and deliberate, toward the stage where the microphone stood unattended. Leo, no, I whispered, but my voice was lost in the sudden, heavy silence. He had already reached the low stage and, without hesitation, stepped up to the microphone. He was so small he had to reach up to adjust it, the gesture so adult-like it was heartbreaking. He surveyed the room of silent, staring adults. I have something to say. His voice, though small, carried clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system. It's about my Aunt Celeste. At the mention of her name, the bride's radiant smile vanished. Her face went slack with shock, then hardened into a pale, anxious mask. Her new husband, Arthur, looked at her, his brow creased in confusion. Julian shot to his feet, a hand half raised. Leo, son, that's enough. Come down from there. But the room was captivated, held in thrall by the small boy at the microphone. Leo took a slow breath, his little shoulders squared against the immense pressure of 1,000 eyes. He put one hand in his pocket, a gesture of casual confidence he must have picked up from his father, and looked directly at the head table. Please stop being mean to my mom, he said. The simple, direct plea landed with the force of a physical blow. The last vestiges of amusement died in the room. Eleanor's face was ashen. Celeste was frozen, a statue in white lace. Leo, get down here right now, Julian repeated, his voice harsher this time, laced with panic. My son ignored him. None of you know my mom, Leo continued, his voice gaining strength. You see her, but you don't see her. She wakes up before the sun does, every single day, to pack my lunch. She helps me with my math homework even when she's so tired her eyes can't stay open. She works on her feet all day, smiling at people who are sometimes rude to her, and when she comes home, she still has enough smiles left for me. She reads to me every single night. I sat frozen, tears streaming silently down my cheeks, blurring the faces of the people who had tried to hurt me. I had never known he saw all that. I thought I had hidden my exhaustion, my struggles, behind a brave face. But he had seen it all. He had seen me. My mom is the strongest person I know, he said, his voice trembling slightly now. And you have no right to make her feel small. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Eleanor, recovering from her shock, started to move toward the stage. Leo, darling, what a sweet sentiment. But this is a wedding. Let's not. Grandmama will get you a big slice of cake. Why don't you come with me? Leo shook his head, his gaze unwavering. I heard you, he said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. I heard Aunt Celeste talking to my dad. That one sentence froze the room again. Celeste lurched to her feet, grabbing Arthur's arm. He's making it up, darling. It's a child's fantasy. Someone get him off that stage. But Arthur hesitated, his eyes flicking from his wife's panicked face to the unnerving calm of the small boy. He gently detached Celeste's hand from his arm and sat back down, his attention fixed on Leo. It was 3 days ago, Leo said, his voice as clear and factual as a news report. I was walking to my friend's house, and I passed Aunt Celeste's apartment building. I saw my dad's car parked out front. Julian and Celeste exchanged a look of pure terror. I was going to go up and say hi, because I miss him, but the door to her apartment was open a little bit, and I heard them talking. They said my name, so I stopped. I didn't mean to listen, but I did. Eleanor tried to intervene again. This is outrageous. A child's overactive imagination ruining my daughter's perfect day. I have proof, Leo said simply. Eleanor fell silent. The entire room held its breath. My son reached into his suit jacket pocket and pulled out a small smartphone, a birthday gift from Julian. A gift Julian was about to regret. I recorded it, Leo said. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. Julian lunged forward, but 2 of the catering staff, big men who looked like they moonlighted as security, instinctively moved to block his path. Celeste's face was now a ghastly, bloodless white. She looked like she was about to faint. Leo tapped the screen of the phone and held it up to the microphone. A moment of static and then a voice filled the room, Celeste's voice, sharp and giddy. Oh, I can't wait to see the look on Alara's face at the wedding. The place cards are perfect. Cafe staff. It's deliciously cruel. Eleanor is totally on board. It's going to be my final, perfect little triumph. A man's voice followed, low and concerned Julian's voice. Just be careful, Celeste. What if someone finds out you're pregnant with my child? It'll blow everything up. Our whole thing. The room erupted. 100 different conversations started at once. I felt the air leave my lungs. Julian and Celeste? Pregnant? My mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. It wasn't just a simple affair. It was my husband and my sister-in-law, my son's father and my son's aunt. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. The recording wasn't finished. Celeste's tinkling laugh echoed chillingly through the speakers. Arthur doesn't suspect a thing. Once we're married, I'll tell him. It'll be too late for him to do anything about it. I've timed it perfectly. He'll think the baby is his. A little premature, perhaps, but his. Then Julian's voice again, thick with something that sounded like pride. You're brilliant. Ever since I left that woman, I feel like I can finally breathe again. You and we were always meant to be the main event, not some sideshow. Leo stopped the recording and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier and more profound than any I had ever experienced. Arthur, the groom, stood slowly, his face ashen, looking like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. His family, seated at a nearby table, looked equally shell-shocked. Celeste had started to sob, not quiet tears, but ragged, gasping cries. Julian's face was a mottled red of shame and fury. Eleanor collapsed into her chair, her mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish out of water. My mom works hard every day to give me a good life, Leo said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion but still steady. Aunt Celeste, Dad, you shouldn't hurt people. It's not right. He then turned his gaze to the abandoned groom. I'm sorry, Mr. Arthur. I didn't want to ruin your wedding, but I thought you should know the truth. The spell was broken. Arthur stared at Celeste, his eyes filled with a terrible, wounded clarity. Is it true? He whispered, his voice cracking. No, he's lying. He's a child. Celeste shrieked, her denial sounding frantic and false even to my own ears. Her entire body was shaking. Eleanor, galvanized into action, finally found her voice. This is a family matter. A misunderstanding. Please, everyone, let's not let a child's story destroy this beautiful day. But it was too late. A distinguished, white-haired man stood up from the groom's table, Arthur's father. Our family has been deceived, he said, his voice resonating with cold fury. Arthur, we're leaving. This marriage is off. The groom's family began to rise as one, a silent, unified front of disgust. Arthur took one last look at his sobbing bride. Celeste, he said, his voice barely audible. Tell me it's not true. She couldn't speak. She just shook her head back and forth, her hands covering her face. Her silence was a confession. In that moment, Julian stepped forward. Stop, he said, his voice heavy with defeat. He looked at the assembled crowd, his gaze finally resting on Arthur. He bowed his head. It's all true. I'm the father of Celeste's child. That was the final blow. The ballroom descended into chaos. Arthur staggered back as if he'd been struck, and his mother rushed to his side. His father took a step toward Julian, his fists clenched, before being restrained by his other sons. Leo stepped down from the stage, the chaos swirling around him as if he were in the eye of a storm. He walked back to me and placed his small, warm hand on mine. I'm sorry, Mom. I couldn't let them. I couldn't find the words. I pulled him into my arms, burying my face in his hair, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and his innocent courage. The noise of the room, Celeste's wailing, Eleanor's frantic scolding of her children, the shocked murmurs of the guests faded into a distant roar. My world had shrunk again, this time to the circle of my arms around my brave, heroic son. Amid the pandemonium, I took Leo's hand. "Let's go home," I whispered. "Our part in this is over." We stood and, with a dignity I didn't know I possessed, began to walk toward the exit. As we reached the foyer, a voice called out, "Wait, please." It was Arthur. He walked toward us, his steps unsteady. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. The man who was supposed to be the happiest man in the room looked utterly broken. "He's very brave, your son," Arthur said, his voice raspy. He crouched down to Leo's level. "Thank you for telling me the truth. You saved me from a life of lies." He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Thank you." Just then, Celeste came running out of the ballroom, her magnificent dress rumpled, her makeup a mess of tears and mascara. "Arthur, please," she cried, grabbing his arm. "Don't listen to him. It's a lie, a vicious lie." He slowly, deliberately removed her hand from his arm. "Julian just admitted it, Celeste. Is he the father or not?" "He's confused. He's just protecting me," she stammered, her desperation making her words nonsensical. Julian appeared behind her, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of exhaustion and shame. "Stop it, Celeste," he said wearily. "The lies are over." He looked at me then, a deep, bottomless well of regret in his eyes, before he looked away. Eleanor joined them, her face contorted with rage, now directed at us. "You," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this. You brought your bitterness and your common little life into my family celebration, and you destroyed it. You aired our dirty laundry in public." For 3 years, I had absorbed their contempt. I had swallowed their insults and endured their condescension. But I was not that woman anymore. My son had shown me the way. I stood up straight, my hand resting protectively on Leo's shoulder. "I didn't do this, Eleanor," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You did. Your son had an affair with his own sister. Your daughter is carrying her own brother's child and was about to trick an innocent man into raising it as his own. The shame is yours to carry, not mine. All we did was turn on the light." Eleanor stared at me, speechless. Celeste had crumpled to the floor, a heap of ruined silk and broken dreams, sobbing, "Arthur, please, don't leave me." Arthur's father reappeared and put a firm hand on his son's back. "Let's go, son. There is nothing for us here." He gave me and Leo a brief, respectful nod. "Thank you for your honesty." As his family led him away, Arthur paused and looked down at Celeste one last time. He slowly twisted the new wedding band from his finger and let it drop to the plush carpet in front of her. "Goodbye, Celeste." He turned and walked away without looking back, leaving a wake of silence behind him. I took Leo's hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's really go home now." The evening air was cool and clean, washing over us as we stepped outside. It smelled of rain and damp earth. As our Uber pulled up, I gave the driver our address. "It's a bit of a drive," I said apologetically. He glanced at us in the rearview mirror at my simple dress and my son's serious face and must have sensed something of the storm we had just weathered. He gave us a kind, crinkling smile. "No problem at all, ma'am. Take all the time you need." As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the grand, tragic theater behind, I pulled Leo close, holding him tightly. "You were so brave, Leo. You're my hero." He snuggled into my side, his voice small against my dress. "Did I do a bad thing, Mom?" I kissed the top of his head, stroking his hair. "No, my love. You did a brave thing. You told the truth. And telling the truth is never, ever a bad thing." My own heart was a tangled mess of emotions, shock at the depth of the betrayal, a strange, distant pity for Arthur, and a profound, bone-deep love for my son. But overriding it all was a feeling I hadn't felt in years, a fierce, unshakable sense of my own worth. "Mom? I'm hungry," Leo mumbled. I let out a laugh that was half a sob. "Me too. We never did get any of that fancy dinner, did we? How about we stop and get the biggest, Messiest pizza we can find and eat it on the floor at home. He looked up at me, his gray eyes shining. With extra olives? With all the extra olives in the world, I promised. The city lights blurred past the window as we drove, two small figures heading back to their small, quiet life. But it wasn't the same life we had left a few hours ago. The foundation had shifted. A door had been kicked open, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we were walking towards something new, something better. We were a team. And we were going to be just fine. 3 months later, the autumn sun, a rare and welcome gift in Portland, streamed through the large front window of the Gilded Sparrow. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air and cast a warm glow on the new, neatly printed nameplate on the counter. Alara Vance, assistant manager. A toast to our Alara. My boss, a kind, bustling woman named Maria, said, raising her mug of coffee. My coworkers cheered, their faces bright with genuine happiness for me. Life, since that catastrophic wedding, had begun to move in the most astonishing ways. Maria, who said she'd been impressed by my quiet strength and my son's courage, the story had, of course, become a piece of local legend, had offered me the promotion. You have a spine of steel, honey, she'd said. This place needs that. For the first time in years, my work felt not like a means of survival, but a step on a path. The fallout for the Vance family had been swift and severe. Julian was forced to resign from his firm after the scandal broke, his reputation in tatters. Celeste had left Portland, moving to a small town in another state to have her baby in anonymity. The ultimate irony was not lost on me. The woman who had so viciously mocked my life as a single mother was now one herself, stripped of her wealth and social standing. Julian had called a few times, his voice filled with a remorse that sounded genuine but came 3 years too late. He wanted to try again, to rebuild. I refused, gently but firmly. That chapter is closed, Julian. I'm writing a new book now. One afternoon, a letter arrived, the envelope bearing Eleanor's elegant, spidery handwriting. It was an apology, stiff and formal, but an apology nonetheless. She wrote of her shame and isolation. I sat with it for a long time before writing back a short, simple note. I wish you peace. The past is the past. I could let go of the anger, but I knew that forgiveness was a different, longer road. The most beautiful change, however, was in my own heart. A few weeks after the wedding, I dusted off my old easel, which had been stored in the back of a closet. I bought a small set of oil paints and a fresh canvas. And I began to paint again. Not for a gallery, not for recognition, but for myself. I painted the view from my kitchen window, the way the gray light turned the fir tree into 1,000 shades of green and silver. I also enrolled in a business management course at the local community college 2 nights a week. It was a dream I'd long deferred, the idea of one day opening my own small place, a combination cafe and art gallery, perhaps. A place of warmth and welcome. This evening, as I sketched in my notebook while Leo did his homework at the kitchen table, he looked up at me. Your drawing is really good, Mom. Thank you, sweetheart. He was thriving. At school, his quiet act of courage had earned him a new kind of respect. He walked with a little more confidence, his shoulders a little straighter. Our bond, always strong, was now something elemental, forged in fire and truth. When you open your own cafe, he said, not if, but when, can we have a special cookie called the Leo? I smiled, my heart full. Absolutely. It'll be the most popular thing on the menu. I looked around my small, sighing house, at the warm lamplight pooling on the wood, at my son's dark head bent over his books, at the half-finished painting of the rainy Portland morning on my easel. This was my world. It wasn't small anymore. It was infinite. That night, the night that was meant to be my greatest humiliation, had become my liberation. It had taught me that dignity isn't something others can give you or take away. It's the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own worth. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew mine.